All right, welcome everyone. Today I have my dear guest, Mr. Nasheed Sabree. We're out here in Atlanta, Georgia, meeting with the man himself, CEO and VP of Data Science at Rower Analytics or Rower Consulting. So, Mr. Nasheed, how are you doing today?
Doing pretty good. Thanks for having me.
No problem, man, no problem. So, Atlanta.
Yes.
How did this all start, man?
Man, well, it depends. If you're talking about my journey with Rower,
Yeah.
or if you're talking
Or
about...
Atlanta, how did you end up here?
Good question. So, I come from a pretty large family.
Okay.
So my mom and dad, they moved to Atlanta in the early 90s.
Oh, okay, we're talking way back.
Yeah, way back.
Yeah.
And the irony of it is, the reason they moved here is because my dad was a math professor. And so he moved down here to accept the job teaching math at the college. It was called Georgia Perimeter, now it's Georgia State. Mm-hmm. And that's ironically my alma mater, right? So everything kind of comes full circle. But the reason I mention that is because everyone talks about data science, data analytics, and they don't always make the connection to the math and the science. Okay. Having that strong foundation in math and science. So my parents definitely made sure I had that. So I always go all the way back when I talk about my journey. So it's almost like a natural progression. And the reason I say that is because I always wanted to understand what's the practical application, right? Doing the multiplication tables or doing all these different things. Understanding these concepts, I always wanted to understand how they connected to the real world. So fast forward to where we are now, as the CEO, founder of Rower Consulting, I think I figured out how math can be applied to things that we witness and observe in the real world and try to derive some understanding, some reasons for the effects that we see. So that's really how all of this started.
Okay, now it's an interesting journey. So your dad's a math professor, moves down from Indiana to Atlanta, and then it starts from there.
Exactly. Okay. And my mom, she teaches math as well at the high school level. So
wow, so you got a family of mathematicians.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Nice. So I think the question on a lot of people's brain is when they hear data analytics, it's just very vague. Like if I told you a coder, it's like, yeah, he's running code. Web design, he makes a website. Pharmacist sells legal drugs.
Right.
But data analyst is like data and analysis. So what does that mean to you? As someone who's been in the space for well over a decade now.
That's a great question. I think it means there's a rationale behind what we're witnessing. So I'll connect it in this way. Every time someone says data, or I mention I'm a data analytics or data science professional, people are trying to understand what is that, right?
I'm still trying to understand it.
Right. So data, I always simply say, is information. Things that you can observe. So I take it all the way back, right? Because the language is changing. It first started off as econometrics back in the day. Then they call it statistics, and we all studied that at some point in school. And now it's called data analytics, data science. Now we're moving into AI, ML. Like, what are we talking about, right?
Yeah.
All we're talking about is simply the scientific process, the one we learned all in school. Like, okay, you start with a hypothesis, you come up with an experiment, you design certain test and learn scenarios, and then you record what you observe. Data takes it a step beyond that. So it says, okay, let's look at these observations, that these things that naturally occur, or things that we witness through certain experiments, and let's evaluate whether or not those results are significant, right? So we say, for example, if I do a coin flip, they say that's a 50-50 scenario, right? 50-50 ratio, 50%, but how do we arrive at that? Like if I pull out a coin and we flip the coin 10 times, it's not guaranteed to be heads 5 times, tails 5 times.
Yeah.
So when we're looking at things that we observe, or data or information, we want to understand if what we observe is really significant, if that observation can occur reliably, right? So we have different tests that we apply to the data that's collected to understand, okay, is this something that we can draw conclusions from, which can then inform how we actually move forward. Now, zoom out a little bit. We look at observations where we're in the business world, we're looking at sales transactions. All of those things are tied to a customer.
Yeah.
And now we're trying to say, can we predict customer behavior? Okay, you came and you swiped your card at this particular restaurant. That's one observation.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you love the restaurant. Doesn't mean you had a great experience.
Yeah, it could be a one-off. Yeah.
Exactly. So now you show up again. Okay. Is there any pattern that we can detect? Is it, when we're having 50% off sales, or is it because we're having a special on this particular item? So there's a natural curiosity that develops when you're talking about data analytics. So it's really an idea, or data science, however you want to term it, is an idea that whatever we observe, we can evaluate, we can test and learn, we can come to some conclusions. And then if we're successful with that, then we can move beyond and start to predict behavior. So that's where you get to the AI ML components, where it's like, okay, I understand we see these observations, we run some tests. This is, something that we feel really confident in. And you hear confidence intervals, you see here statistical significance. Once we get to that point, then it's like, all right, we can reliably predict what will happen with this particular interaction in the observable environment.
So I think the question that comes to people's mind is, so you start with the hypothesis, and then you do your testing, and you want your results to validate your hypothesis, right? And then you get evidence or results.
Right.
But if we go back to data, what is meant by data? Is it a picture? Is it a video, text, spoken language? What falls under data? Because I think it's so massive when you're like, okay, data, but is it numbers, letters?
That's a great question. I think data is everything that you can observe.
Okay.
And you can document the observation. So when you talk about pictures, absolutely. That's why you have all of these capture type of images where you have to actually classify it in order to access your LinkedIn or whatever. All of these things are helping to teach the computer how to recognize pictures, so that they can catalog that or categorize that. So anything that can be observed and recorded, and then we can actually store it. And that's what we're looking at in terms of data. So it can be spoken word. It can be written text, where you see Chat GPT and things popping up. It can definitely be pictures, that's computer vision and things like that. So I always say everything that we observe can be documented and categorized and apply data points to it. Even this room that we're in, there's spatial recognition, where it's like, if you're in a physical retail store, they have cameras that identify where you are. They even have eye tracking software. So where it's like, all right, where are your eyes actually going in the store when you're actually looking at the shelf? All of these things are collecting data points. So if you think about it in that way, it's like, how much information can I collect about a particular environment, something that's actual material in this environment that we live in. And if we can capture that in a reasonable way, we can store it and we can use that as data.
Okay, interesting. So it seems as vast as it is.
It is. It definitely is.
It definitely it enters into all realms, we can say, of someone's life. Okay, so we have the scientific process, we have the data. So what is the analytics component of it? I know that in the scientific method, that's like you're analyzing. You're testing your hypothesis, but what does it really mean to analyze data?
I think the best answer I can give you is asking questions and not being stuck to what you thought the answer would be.
Okay.
So is that testing learn process that I mentioned as a part of your experiment. That's where the analytics comes in. So I always say people who are really good at being analysts or data scientists, they're really good at asking questions.
Okay.
Because, for example, you may see a trend. You don't jump to a conclusion and say, okay, this trend is significant. You have to be willing to say, is there anything else that could be leading to what I'm seeing? Are there any other factors that are actually causing what we're observing to happen or to occur? And when you do that, then you actually are moving into the realm of being an analyst or being focused on analytics, because you're trying to arrive at conclusions You're going to run into a lot of correlation, like, hey, this happens and this happens. But there's a concept called multicollinearity, where it's saying just because two things happen and they seem to impact one another doesn't mean that they're actually meaningful.
So that brings us to causation doesn't equal...
Correlation doesn't equal causation.
Yes,
You're absolutely, there you go.
So correlation doesn't equal causation.
Exactly.
Meaning if two things are related somehow, doesn't mean that the cause is the same, or?
Exactly. So for example, every time it rains, I find a quarter in the couch.
Okay.
It's like, it doesn't mean that the rain is somehow connected.
Yeah.
That could just be a coincidence. Maybe because it's raining outside, you don't go outside, you're sitting on the couch watching TV.
Yeah, quarter.
Right. So it's other factors that could potentially cause what has happened. It's not related to what's happening at the same time.
Okay. So we have the, asking questions. I think, people like analysis is like E equals MC squared and running all these derivatives and fancy.
Right.
Is that really what a data analyst is doing? Or are they're identifying trends, seeing, trying to get, let's say, the big picture. But then when let's say they have a question in mind that they want to answer, how would they go about answering that question using the data that they've gathered?
Good question. I think to answer your first question, no, that's not at all what data analysts are doing.
Yeah.
We like to make everybody believe that what we're doing is rocket science, and there is some science in there, right? But for the most part, data analysts are trying to answer the question you asked earlier. What is the data that's available? So they're doing a lot of what we call data engineering, where it's like, all right, we're trying to actually gather all of the data points, all of the information possible that could help to explain or answer the question. So that's what most data analysts are spending their time doing. It's like, okay, how do I go and find information to help answer this question? I'll give you an example. If you're looking at a restaurant, and we're trying to understand what items do we sell the most of, right? Okay, so now you say, all right, we have a database with transactions. So every time someone comes in, swipes their card, and pays cash. Cool. But then we also have a database of information around like how much it costs for the business to actually secure those items and produce whatever it is you get.
Yeah.
But then the business will come back and say, okay, you answered the first question. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
What's the profit margin on this particular item?
Okay.
So now you have to go back. So you're constantly trying to answer the questions with what's available. But then if they say, how much, should we raise price on a particular sales item? Which is a question I received when I was working at Focus Brands.
Okay.
And the question is, are we going to increase price or not, right? So as an analyst, I can just look and say, okay, well, it looks like customers are buying a lot of products, raise the price.
Yeah.
Or you can say, let me identify additional information that will help me better answer the question. So what I did is I said, we have restaurants in every locale across the United States. Let's look at the zip code level and see what the household income is in those zip codes.
Okay.
Let's understand when we've increased price before, did we lose customers, right? These are all questions.
Yeah, they definitely are. Yeah.
So now it's like, do we have that information that can help inform these questions that the analyst, is asking? So now it says, okay, well, let's get some Experian data, which gives us household level information across the United States.
Yeah.
That's one data point. Now, based on what I mentioned before in terms of the tables where you have transaction level data, you have sales and et cetera, what you don't necessarily have is the history for when we change price. So now you have to go back to the data engineering piece to say, okay, can I identify in the data set where our price changed for a specific menu item at a specific restaurant? And when that happened, did we then lose customers, et cetera? So now this is where I always say it's a big puzzle.
No, it is. It keeps,
you
keeps
see
going.
it. That's what an analyst does. It's like, once you identify a good question, now you have to chase down the data to help support.
Okay. So it just seems like you ask a question, you get the answer, and then that answer produces another question, and then it keeps going. And then, so is it possible that you might have started off with, how do I increase sales? how to identify my profit margin for the company, why is revenue decreasing in the first quarter of the year, and then as you're answering that question, you're left with more questions or other analyses that you can present as well. Is that a common thing that happens?
Common, super common. That's exactly what happens.
Okay.
And then the data science piece where you're talking about algorithms, et cetera.
Yeah.
Or once you answer that question confidently, we're going to look at the data that you've engineered, the data sets that you brought together to make sense of. And once we trust that the results are sound, then we can build forecasting models, things of that nature to say, okay, now let's predict based on historical performance how well revenue will move, to your point, in the future.
Okay, so data science, we've heard that a lot. So is data analysis, data analytics synonymous with data science? Because I think I can convolute the two all the time. So when we say data analytics, it's more of what you were mentioning before of scientific model. You start with the hypothesis, you do your testing, you're getting the result. But when we, data science, is it like a lab engineer and a scientist, is that more, we could say like the coding side of data, or like the, if we want to get philosophical, the essence of data, or how can we maybe understand the similarities and maybe the differences so that it becomes clear?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny how the language is changing, right?
Yes, yeah.
It was data analytics for a long time, now it's data science.
Yeah.
The way I draw a distinction between the two is data science or data scientists, they take the data that the analyst has deemed valuable to the business and they apply mathematical logic on top of that.
Okay.
To run your statistical significance test. To understand, okay, is this observation, the question and the answer that an analyst provided, is it valid? And if it is, then we'll leverage it. If it isn't, then my test will determine that, and we can make adjustments to the conclusions that we derived. So to make a long story short, data scientists are more technical in their statistical and mathematical applications of their algorithms and their logic on top of what an analyst has done. So think of them as like a team. The analyst, does as much as he can or she can to bring about certain answers. And they say, okay, here are the things that I've observed. Now, test these, apply certain logic and principles, typically using Python, R, SAS, etc., and then see if you can validate these conclusions that I've drawn, identify how often these conclusions will occur in the future, and then help the business to expand, on this logic. So that's how I look at it. So there's teams of analysts who help to inform the business around, these are the things that I'm observing. These are things that might be worthwhile to allow our data scientists to carry forward. Okay,
so it's sort of a team. The data analyst brings it, halfway, half pitch, and then the scientists take it from there.
Absolutely.
Okay. But there are things that an analyst does that a data scientist does. Could it be the software or the, let's say, programming languages that they use? Is there, are they similar?
They're similar. So the way I explain it is, this is how I draw the distinction. Data analysts, I always recommend learning Excel, SQL, and a visualization software. Tableau, Power BI, those are the main ones. There are others, but those are the most popular ones. You'll land a job as an analyst where you get to do what we call exploratory analysis. You get to go and look at the data, ask all cool questions, visualize what you're seeing. That's great. What you haven't done is apply any statistical, mathematical, logical models to validate what you're seeing. It's like, okay, well, I see sales went up in March. I see it went down in June. Looks like seasonality. It could have been COVID, it could have been. But what you're now reporting to the business just shows it could be an anomaly. So now a data scientist will say, okay, I see the same trends, but I'm going to apply leveraging Python. There's a lot of cool tools, but Python primarily, because that's a mathematical coding language that allows you to apply those mathematical concepts to the data set. So in that example, they'll look and they'll say, let's look at our historical data. We see that this is an anomaly for this 1 year. We'll remove that from our analysis. And now we're going to build a model that ignores the things that are anomalies because our mathematical tests have proven these are not significant.
Okay, and by anomalies, that's like outlier.
Right,
so
exactly.
Something that stands out.
Exactly.
Okay.
That doesn't happen consistently in the data.
Okay.
Correct. And so when data scientists apply that, you get more than just a trend line, which an analyst would present. That's a data scientist is going to take it a little step beyond and give the business that confidence that we can actually reliably predict how things will move based on the models that I've developed.
Okay.
Because typically, and if I condensed it down to like two things, I would say an analyst typically looks at historical data.
Yeah.
A data scientist is hoping to predict the future.
Okay, I like that distinction. Okay, that eases people's minds, you know. And so the other thing is, no one's born a data analyst, right? And so, you know, I know you spoke a little bit about your parents being in math and, you know, you having that bit of a background. But is there a trajectory, you know, because like example, if someone wants to be a doctor, they go to, you know, med school, residency, you know, lawyer, same thing. But, you know, now when you look at social media, it's like, you know, pilot, you know, ex-pilot, now analyst, ex-teacher, now analyst, you know, rugby coach, now analyst, you know. So it's like, okay, so there's people from completely, you know, different sectors who are all analysts. And so is it, you know, what is it that's drawing, you know, people from such different backgrounds that you see in the space now?
I think I was going to say, when you said no one is born an analyst.
Yes.
I think we are.
Okay.
I think all human beings are naturally born analysts.
Okay.
Because if you observe the baby, all they're trying to do is make sense of the world.
Okay,
so it's a natural thing.
Yes. Yeah.
And so no matter what field you find yourself in, you're trying to better understand that environment so that you can be more successful.
Yeah.
And I think that was the key that it will allow so many people to leverage analytics, whether it's in sports, whether it's in medicine, whether it's in academia, wherever you are, you're going to see a need to say, how do we improve the outcomes that we're witnessing?
Yeah.
Looking historically, you're going to do some analysis and then saying, all right, based on that, I want to improve into the future. Here are the levers I need to adjust to do so. So myself, I started out, and I always thought that I used to say, hey, I didn't go to the computer science route, so why am I in data analytics?
Yeah, I feel like myself as well and others, it's like, okay, I don't have a computer science major, you know, I don't, CSS, HTML, you know, all these different coding languages. I'm like, okay, so, but it seems like, you know, at least for data analysis, you don't need 50 different languages and, you know, building pipelines and all this crazy stuff, you know.
You don't.
Okay.
Because those things will come.
Okay.
I think the key, and this is what has opened up success for me, is being dispositioned the correct way.
Okay.
And understanding the problem space. Because one of the values that I bring to any environment I'm in is I always ask the question that no one's asking.
Okay.
So I always say the ability to ask smart questions will unlock the opportunity to derive the answer, right? To arrive at the answer. So every environment I'm in, I'm always thinking, but the irony is I wanted to be a doctor when I was young. I did.
Oh, wow.
I definitely wanted to be a doctor.
Yeah.
And then I kind of progressed and I studied economics my first 2 years of undergrad.
Yeah.
And then I went into sociology, which is what I got my degree in. And I was like, sociology has nothing to do with data science, but it does. We're trying to understand what's happening in the social environment.
Yeah.
We do have tests. We did a lot in statistics where we say, oh, we observe this number of students are performing at this level in the class. You know, if we do this, let's see if this adjusts how well they perform. That's data analytics. That's data science even, because we're doing the statistical tests using SPSS and all that, and I'm learning a little bit of the syntax. So I'm doing a little bit of coding. But the reason I say you don't have to start there is because the natural curiosity is going to move you to actually want to apply the statistical test to what it is you're observing. So I say I started with a natural curiosity, and then I learned the tools. I learned the skills to
Yeah.
help me answer these questions without relying on someone else.
Okay. All right. Okay. I like how you did it. Because I think most people it's like, let me get on 10 different boot camps and create all these fancy projects and but I think it's, as you reiterated, is starting with what you have and then finding the skills to further propel what you already have. Being you having economics and sociology and being able to leverage that to find the analyst route that suits you.
Absolutely.
Okay. I guess the other question is, for someone who is a bit intimidated by tech, but is seeing everyone everyone's jumping on the tech bandwagon, which is a good thing, as we're moving into a digital economy.
Absolutely.
And everything is digitalized and on the online realm. I think in whatever position you're in, you're going to need to upskill into some sort of tech, But for people who are looking to make that transition into data analytics specifically, I know you mentioned the skills, SQL, Excel, SQL, and a data visualization tool. And so where should someone start? Should they start with maybe leveraging, whatever they did their BA or studied in the past, or should they go about learning data analytics maybe in a different way?
I'll say what it works for me, because
I know it's not a one size fits all.
Yeah, absolutely not. And I think what worked for me was I started with the visualization tool.
Okay.
So I was encouraged to kind of jump into, coding and HTML, CSS, JavaScript, etc. And not having that background, that was intimidating.
Yeah.
So I started with the visualization platform.
Okay.
You can get access to data that you are interested in, whether that's sports, whether that's, movies, whether it's books, and you can explore it. And you can see what you're exploring visually. So that was easier, to digest. So I started out doing that. But then it was like, okay, well, that's comfortable. The data's already prepared for me.
Yeah.
I can create some cool things that look like I've done some deep research, and I can start to present how I see the world and how I would answer the questions. That's the first start. Then so that's where I started.
Okay.
So when I tried to move into an analyst role, then I was tested on, hey, how much SQL do you know? How well can you utilize Excel? And I'm like, oh man.
Yeah.
So I failed so many interviews, man. Trying to jump into the space.
Yeah.
But what I did have is a desire to tell stories.
Okay.
And so I was like, okay, well, if this is the only blocker, learn the coding.
Okay.
But now I'm learning it with a purpose, because I don't tell people to go study SQL because it's not going to connect. You're going to be sitting there writing queries. You're not even understanding what the visual result of these queries will be.
Yeah.
Even when you get the answer right, it's not connecting. But once you start to build out charts and graphs and say, hey, I want to add this. Oh, it's not in the data set. Now when you start writing SQL, it's like, okay, I know I'm adding additional columns. I'm adding dimensions. I'm adding facts. So now it starts to make sense. So now it's like something I always tell people is like, we start with the end in mind.
Okay.
Right? What do you want to do? And then it's like, now your mind will find a way forward, and you'll find a way to fill the gaps. That's what I recommend.
Connecting the dots. Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. Yeah. Because at least from my journey, it's like, you start with SQL and, select from where, and then, you learn all of these, aggregate functions, logical functions, mathematical functions. And then it's like, what is this?
Right.
What is this? And then, queries and subqueries. And I think had you started with something and then worked backwards, as you mentioned, you would have seen how this is connecting to the final, because then you do all of that and then you have to clean it. And then it's like, now visualize it. And it's like, what am I, what is the right, do I use a bar chart? Do I use a pie chart or a line graph, bar graph? But had you had the end in mind, probably would have made it a lot easier.
Absolutely.
Okay,
absolutely.
So if we're going to start with the end in mind, should you start with things you're interested in, or maybe things that are needed, in the analytics realm, or what would be the best way to start with the end in mind? Let me start with projects I can showcase, or let me start with a problem that needs solving and then work back from there?
I think I would recommend starting with something that you're familiar with
Okay.
and interested in.
Okay.
So for me, it was education. You know, I thought I was going to move into education policy.
Yeah.
So I wanted to understand student performance. I could look at that stuff all day.
Yeah.
You know, and then the National Center for Educational Statistics has all of that data for free. So you have it at the school district level, you have individual schools, you have it broken down by race, you have it broken down by percent of students with who receive free or reduced lunch, which is a great proxy for, you know, poverty. So now you can look at all of these elements, things that transfer into many different spaces. And I can explain exactly what I mean, because that was my journey. I started there and it was fun. What are the SAT scores? What are the ACT scores? What are the average GPAs? And now I'm looking at it, I can look back at my alma mater, you know, here in Atlanta. I'm like, okay, let me see how well we perform. So now I go down this rabbit hole, and then I'm trying to move out of education policy, which is a nonprofit, into healthcare. You know what I found out? Everything I was looking at transfers. Now, instead of looking at students, I'm looking at patients. Where do patients live? What kind of insurance do they have? You know, will the income in an area support, you know, commercial, you know, insurers versus more of a Medicaid population? That's free and reduced lunch. You know, it's like we want to understand, is this an area that has a lot of poverty where we're going to get a lot of people who don't have commercial insurance visiting our hospital, which means we're not going to receive 100% of the value for that visit, because Medicaid, I think they pay out like 75%. And there's a whole host of things, but now I'm just transferring what I learned
from one thing to another.
And it's like, we're telling the same story.
Okay.
And then move from that to home building. It's like, all right, well, real estate is all about what the area will support. So we want to understand poverty, we want to understand income, we want to understand, do these parents or these adults have children? Do they not? How old are they? Are they looking to retire? Are they looking for senior homes? All of these things are like, and all of that started with visualizing education data.
Okay, interesting. I like how you're able to transfer, you know, from one realm, you know, education into healthcare, into real estate. So it seems like there's a lot of things, transferable skills, adapting to new climates, and just having that, you know, that asking the right questions so that you can get to the right answers.
Absolutely.
Okay. In a broader sense, what would you say, you know, if I were to say the state of analytics, you know, is it really something that's gonna, you know, that's creeping into, you know, all different sectors? Because you've mentioned quite, you know, different and unrelated sectors. And so is analytics or data analytics something that everyone is going to need to learn in the next maybe 10, 15, 20 years?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so. And I think there's a huge opportunity for those who choose to do it.
Yeah.
Especially in industries that are oftentimes overlooked.
Okay.
And I've thought about this for a while, and I said one of the greatest, I think, opportunities when it comes to data science is to free up the human mind from the menial tasks we're being, you know, bogged down with.
Yeah.
To allow our best and brightest minds to apply data science and data science principles on the most value-added opportunities in our environment. You know, whether that's recycling, whether that's cleaning up the ocean, whether that's, you know, figuring out how to harness more energy from the sun or from the water that, you know, we have, the oceans, right?
Yeah.
All of these things are opportunities. However, when many of us are bogged down with chasing after, you know, more money, or being bogged down with, you know, manual tasks on the job that are brainless activities, we're losing out on the opportunity. So I think all industries will be impacted. It's just a matter of how people invest in those industries and how, you know, important they look at, or how important these problems are to being solved.
Okay. And when we talk about, you know, those are some very big philosophical. Yeah, but I can see how, you know, leveraging data analytics can really help us understand, you know, or solve some of these, you know, huge crises that we're facing. So let me flip it on its head. So if there's a company out there and, you know, they're seeing yourself and they're seeing Rower Consulting, how can Rower Consulting or what you do, help with solving some of businesses, the business's problems, Where does Rower Consulting fit in the data analytics world?
I think that's a great question. I think Rower primarily fits in with organizations that are looking to add value and to bring about real results for their company. And I'll explain it like this. There are many companies that choose to do what I call check the box.
Okay.
It's like we don't have to change anything. We're in a good situation. We want to just kind of maintain the status quo.
Yeah.
So the opportunity that Rower brings about is for those business leaders who want to stretch, who want to actually do more in the company.
Yeah.
To rethink and reimagine how business is done. That's where I think Rower brings that particular expertise to say, not only can you do analytics work, you can do data science work, but you can also leverage software engineering to build out a platform that is all things analytics for your entity, for your company.
Okay, wow. So it's like a full stop shop.
Absolutely.
All things related analytics. And so let's start from the beginning. What the inception of Rower, was Rower, built, to specifically target businesses, or was there a need that you saw, that said, hey, my company can come in and fill that, for you. And so let's start from the beginning of how did Rower sort of come about?
So Rower came about as a result of me seeing an opportunity within businesses to do more.
Okay.
So as an analyst, I spent a lot of time and energy actually just building out charts and graphs that explain what has historically happened, right?
Yeah.
And when you do that for enough companies, what you find out is they're not always looking to kind of move to that next level, right? So I was sitting around one of the companies I worked for, and I came across an acronym that was called ROW.
Okay.
Or ROWE.
Okay.
So it was a results-oriented work environment. And what I realized is, because this is a time before you could work remote.
Yeah.
This is all about, being in the office from 8 to 5 every day.
Yeah.
And I realized most of that time that we spent in the office wasn't adding value. So I was like, I want to build a company that focuses in on adding value and being compensated for the results that we bring.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, let's form a company that's called Rower Consulting.
It's taken from...
Exactly.
Okay, that's interesting. And how have you found the journey so far, moving from in data analysts to now, VP and CEO of Rower? How have you found that transition to be?
Oh, it's been a tough one. It's been tough, but it's been worthwhile. When I first started out on the journey, I had a number of great mentors.
Okay.
Who were like, hey, if you're going to go down this path, I think it's the right time to do it.
Yeah.
And here's some advice. Here's some things I would consider as you kind of move out. And that advice was build relationships.
Okay.
And so from the beginning of my journey, I've been blessed to actually have wonderful relationships with executives across all different industries, from pharmaceuticals to healthcare to the restaurant space. And those relationships have really allowed Rower to grow.
Okay, so it's being in the right space and knowing the right people that have sort of brought about the clientele that you sort of serve.
Absolutely.
Are there certain businesses that you're looking to attract, or is it any, like a small, I just had some coffee here at Walter's.
Right.
So is it like a small coffee shop, or is it, anywhere from 10 to 15 employees to companies of, let's say, upwards of 500,
So most of our clients are larger organizations, so definitely upwards of 500. So we work with a number of Fortune 500 companies, publicly traded companies.
Yes.
And I think the reason we do that is because in order to support our team and the growth that we're experiencing, we don't want to put that type of strain on a smaller business.
Yeah.
So we set out to really help those companies that want to be innovative, those companies that actually want to leverage analytics, because everyone said, or data science, everybody says they want to.
Yeah.
But when you look behind the scenes, it's like, if it isn't broke, we don't really want to fix it.
Definitely.
Because there's there's some risk reward there, right? If you say, hey, I'm going to be the innovative leader within my organization, you have to take risk.
Yeah.
So we're looking for organizations that are willing to do that. And we found some great partners. But the smaller mom and pop type organizations, we would love to offer a product of some sort. And we're working on some things internally because I think there's a huge opportunity there that some of, your consulting firms overlook. So we would love to be able to offer a product. But right now, as we're in growth mode, we're focused primarily on larger size organizations.
Okay, nice. If I were to broaden, let's say, the scale of Rower, you were based here, we're here in Atlanta.
Yep.
Is Rower currently, just in Georgia, or do you guys operate, statewide?
We operate across the United States.
Okay.
And we have a team of consultants that are all remote at the moment.
Yeah.
Our home base here is actually here in Atlanta.
Okay.
However, we have a satellite office in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And we have some exciting things coming. I'm not going to share all of it, but we also have an international team that's based in India where they handle a lot of our offshore work, like a lot of the basic like data, entry data management, data engineering. And we also have some that are leading like some data science projects, but that primarily is for scale when we need to actually scale up for clients and offer like back office support after something is stood up.
Yeah.
However, our team is based all over the United States. We have a number, I think we have about 6 employees here in Atlanta, but we have a number of them spread all over the US.
Okay, wow. So it seems like the business really can cater to, people in your locality and nationwide.
Absolutely.
So that definitely reaches, scale and magnitude. I think the other question on my mind was, what is the trajectory? So we spoke a little bit about, getting into the space, and like other careers are a bit more like you start off as, a junior associate, and then you work your way up, maybe to some managerial positions, and then, you become the executive calling the shots one day.
Right.
But for an analyst, does it really, is it like, it doesn't seem to be that linear. Maybe you could, branch off and, be a voice or a creator in a certain realm. And so what would be the best way of someone who wants to get in the space, is looking for that career growth, but not necessarily like I need to be the CEO of a company or manager, but I want to do something creative. I want to add value in a different way.
I think what I would recommend is being a business analyst.
Okay.
So there's different types of analysts. There's a business analyst, and we can say a data analyst and just leave it at that. A business analyst doesn't have to be as technical.
Okay.
So they're the people who are basically going to be your glorified admin to connect the dots for the business. So I always recommend people finding a way in that way.
Yeah.
And that opens you up to doing more technical work, moving from a business analyst to more of an analyst type of role.
Yeah.
Or you can move into project management. But the value of that is you will be given the opportunity to do some technical work. So whether there's data engineering tasks, et cetera, that maybe the broader team can't get to, you can adopt some of that and take on responsibility where there's no pressure, but you can actually test your skills. Say, hey, I ran a couple careers. I think this is what we want to actually have. And it's like, oh, wow, you did that without waiting on the data engineers. Yeah. Now you get more and more responsibility. So the way I actually moved was I started out as an analyst. You move up based on the responsibilities, and the titles change. It's strategy analyst, market intelligence, consumer insights, et cetera. Once you get enough experience there, then you can actually move into a managerial role. So I left an analyst role, applied to become the manager of consumer insights. Landed that role, and I was like, okay, I'm on my way, right? And then from there, I was like, I want to do something that allows me to realize the value of the results that I bring. And I'll explain what I mean. So I was in the company and I started in October, right? So I was ineligible for my bonus come March. It's like you have to be there maybe before June or something, or you don't get the bonus that's paid out the following year. Fine, right? So I hit the ground running. I'm working. Fast forward, long story short is within a couple of months, I deliver, analytics tool, because that's really what I love. It's like bringing analytics into a tool that the business wants to leverage and use to make decisions. Yeah. I did that a couple months. My manager says, hey, this is $1 million tool. Like, you've reimagined the way we think about doing our business. We love this tool.
Yeah.
Great. So how about that bonus?
Yeah. No, definitely, man. Yeah.
And we have an amazing relationship. So I can tell this story.
Yeah.
And so the response was like, our hands are tied.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
You gotta ask the boss.
Right. Yeah, so long story short, I don't get my bonus. So I'm like, okay, I'm enjoying the work I'm doing here. I was like, I don't really like that, right? I want to be in a position where when I add value, when I bring results, hence the rower, then I want to be compensated for it. So I set out on my own. I said, okay, let me go ahead and, formulate my company, go and partner with people who actually share a similar interest, like very skilled individuals who have deep expertise in the space.
Yeah. Let's
form a company where we can go about delivering these types of results for any organization that's looking for, innovative solutions and expertise. Everybody says that they do this, right? But there's levels to it. So our team, we know what we're doing. We've done it for a long time, and we've done it at a high level. So some people will come and say, yeah, we'll do it, and they're figuring it out as they go.
Yeah.
We can look, we spend a week or so talking with the client. We've seen that issue before. We've done, this is how you get around that. And that has allowed us to build the relationships we built. So I set out on my own and said, okay, let me do this. So I started doing some contracting work, and I worked with a number. If I listed all the companies that I've worked with, that it would fill up a page, and it's some of the best companies in the world, man.
Yeah.
And so when I started to realize, hey, these needs that I was filling in these companies as an employee, these exist everywhere. And there's not enough talent to answer all of these questions, to bring about all these results. So in Former Rower, we just got to work. I mean, we work for pharmaceutical clients, some of the top, CPG clients in the world.
Yeah.
I could list names. It's over like 20 companies that I've personally sat in, and we've actually talked with executive stakeholders about what they're doing, what they're trying to accomplish, and I'm the expert in the room, right? So it's an amazing thing, and then I have a wonderful team that brings expertise in areas and arenas that I don't necessarily have, right? So as a team, we cover so many bases, but what we found is no matter how large an organization is, think about trying to turn around, a huge oil tanker. It's going to take a while, right? It's not going to be quick. So many of them are still working on basic data engineering tasks.
Yeah.
And they're hiring what they consider to be experts who come in, and they'll eat up a year's worth of budget, and say, hey, we're working on that. It's like, and I'm looking like, how much did you all pay for that? Yeah. And it's done wrong. They haven't even applied like columnar indexing, or they haven't done anything. It's like, how much did you pay for this, right? And it's like, okay, well, interesting. So that, I think, is the biggest differentiator, is we come in thinking about the client first and how we can add value. If it's not an opportunity for us to really come in and add meaningful value, and if you're just trying to kind of, check the box, maybe we come in and help you for a little bit, but that doesn't excite us.
Yeah. You guys, it seems like you really streamline that process, and you make it easier for companies to relax, and we know we're in good hands.
Yeah, exactly.
And you have the results to show what you're able to do, and you're able to show what you can do, reimagine, as you mentioned.
There you go.
All right, so we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Welcome back, folks, to part 2 of our interview with Mr. Nasheed Sabree. We've got to know a little bit about data analytics, data science, and Rower Consulting, which is going to take the world by storm. But now we'd like to know a little more about the man behind the plan. So, Mr. Nasheed, if you could tell us a little bit about your upbringing. I've been coming to Atlanta, for a good portion of my life. I have a lot of family here. But if you could tell us about your upbringing, about, life in Atlanta, What was that like? Help us give a little picture about, the man behind Rower.
Absolutely. So growing up in Atlanta, early 90s,
Yeah.
it was pretty amazing for me. And that's because I was number two of what became 9 children.
Wow.
So a pretty sizable family.
Yeah.
My mom is the oldest of 15 children from her mom and dad. My dad is the youngest of 9 children.
Okay, now I know why they both needed math.
Right.
So many children to count.
Exactly. So there's some data science.
There's some data science happening in the family, yeah?
So it was an enjoyable childhood. I grew up in a small community here in Atlanta. I went to a small private school pretty much from the time I was in kindergarten all the way through 12th grade.
Okay.
So that was, I think, what helped shape who I am. And I learned a lot just being in that type of nurturing environment.
Okay. Would you say being, because here in America you have like the South and the North and East and West. Do you think being in the South, of course I know you've traveled around America. Did it give you a certain predisposition towards maybe being a certain way? Did your environment have a good or bad effect on you growing up?
I think it had a really good effect on me, and I think I'll explain it this way. I grew up as a Muslim in America.
Yeah.
And I went to a small Islamic private school.
Okay.
So classroom sizes or student body sizes in each class was like 20, was like a big class.
Yeah.
So I grew up around the same individuals pretty much from the time I was 5, and I'm still close with them today.
Okay.
So a lot of that is what helped kind of shape me and keep me insulated from some of the things that were happening in probably the broader Atlanta community.
Yeah.
And I think that's what has allowed me to kind of be the person I am today.
Okay. And how would you say, Islam has helped shape, your values, your person, you as an individual? What was, you said you went to an Islamic private school?
I did.
Okay. And how was that experience, versus, let's say, a public school?
That's a good question. I think for me, I went to public school 1 year.
Okay.
In 6th grade.
Nice.
And the reason they put me in public school was they wanted to offer more academic rigor, right?
Okay.
The private school had a wonderful environment. It's called Mohammed Schools of Atlanta.
Okay.
Where they have Clara Mohammed Elementary School, W.D. Mohammed High School.
Okay.
And there's a lot of rich history there, a lot of amazing alumni who have graduated and come out of that institution. And there's a rich history just in terms of that institution. There's a documentary that a friend of mine is working on now, so that's to come. But the idea was, okay, within this environment, can we challenge, our child? This is what my parents were thinking.
Yeah.
Because I loved to read. I love math, science. I absolutely loved it. So they're like, all right, let's put them in this environment. And what they found was that environment offered up different challenges. While it did provide academic rigor, they wanted me to be in an environment where it protected some of that innocence, if you will, try to limit the exposures to certain outside influences. So quick in and out. In the 6th grade, back in Muhammad schools as a 7th grader, I was not happy.
Yeah.
But now as an adult, I look back and I say that was a great decision for my parents.
And could you tell me a little bit about I know your friend has a documentary, but what is it that makes, Muhammad School so special?
I think the history, right? Okay. So I say I'm an African-American Muslim.
Yeah.
That in and of itself seems like different. Like everyone's trying to figure out like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
And I always say
the first thing is convert,
Right.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, well, still trying to kind of place like, okay, help me understand the context for how that conversion took place, right? And so I tell people, okay, think about Muhammad Ali. And they're like, oh, of course, everybody knows Muhammad Ali. So it's like, well, what brought about a Muhammad Ali is what produced me, right? Okay. So without going too far into history, but Muhammad Schools of Atlanta is birthed from that same movement. And there was a lady, Clara Muhammad, who was the wife of the late leader, Elijah Muhammad, who led the Nation of Islam in the early 30s. But she started with this whole notion of, my children won't be educated in a public school. And here's the birth of private education. Because it was unlawful to withhold your children from actually going and attending the public school. And she did this way back then. Like,
Oh, wow.
And so she took a stand, risked being put in jail
Yeah.
to say, my children won't be educated in your schools. They will be educated in what they call the University of Islam.
Okay.
And so we call it Clara Muhammad Elementary School to honor her legacy.
Wow.
And then W.D. Muhammad High School to honor the legacy of her son, who turned the Nation of Islam to true Orthodox Islam. So it's a rich legacy, a rich history that we come from. And it's an opportunity to kind of share that with the world, you know, because most people that I talk to in normal conversation, they don't understand it. They don't.
Yeah.
But this is something I lived intimately. This is what shaped me. Like I said, my mom, whose dad joined the Nation of Islam, he has 15 children. So she has 14, you know, brothers and sisters, right?
Yeah.
And they all emphasize education, all of them. Like I was introduced to tech from some of her brothers who were my forerunners, who were business intelligence, you know, analysts, or they were doing like coding and BBA and Excel, Microsoft Excel, and Access.
Yeah.
So I'm not new. Like this is almost like a natural progression. They introduced us to like the DOS and like how to program on the back end. That was our introduction to tech. Me and my siblings. I have 8 siblings.
Yeah.
But then on my dad's side, there's educators as well, right? So I grew up in this environment at home where education was emphasized, right? Where math and science were the norm. And then it's like, okay, when I go outside of that house, I'm staying with my aunts and uncles, they're reinforcing it. Like everything is a test. Here's a trivia question. Here's this, here's that. And then I'm placed in an environment like Mohammed schools, which is just protect that, right? The natural curiosity that's in him, he'll find his way forward. He'll continue to read and study and learn and grow. And sure enough, I guess my parents knew what they were doing.
Wow, man. And so as an African-American Muslim, what are some of the challenges that you would say African-American, you know, Muslims in the U.S. face, and maybe even abroad, you know, in terms of, as you mentioned, you know, seeing the rich history of your family and your ancestors? Most people, when they see someone who identifies as African American, it says, "Oh, okay, like welcome to Islam." You know?
Right.
You know, and we don't really understand that. You know, hey, there's some lineage, you know, in their Islam in America, being the first Muslims to be in America. You know, from the start of the transatlantic slave trade. You know, bringing over Muslims from that part of the world. And so, what would you say some of the challenges are? Is it identity? You know, being a Muslim and American, or does it come to societal challenges, you know?
I think it's both. I think it's definitely identity, because when I show up in any environment amongst Muslims, you know, if they're not African American, there's okay, who is he? Help me understand.
Yeah, like, are you Somali?
Right. Or
are you
Senegalese?
Exactly. Are you from Nubia?
Right.
You know?
That's exactly
Berber,
right.
You know, right. You know?
And so that's one challenge. And then it's like, and when you're amongst African Americans, right? Just a peer group. Because I spent time in college prior to being married. They're trying to understand. You know, you don't engage in the same normal things that we engage, normal in quotes, right? You're not drinking, you're not doing all these things. You're not engaging in these behaviors. Who are you, right? So it's like, I've always wrestled with that dynamic, that dilemma, trying to find a space where I kind of fit in. And where who I am is understood, right? So those spaces, quite frankly, have not been created yet outside of Mohammed schools. You know, in that small community in East Atlanta where we have a mass, we have businesses, we have some things there that we're proud of. That's the one environment where I felt like at home. So I went for 2 years in college. I went to Howard University to play soccer. Because in addition to reading, studying math and science and things, I was an amazing soccer player from the time I was young all the way up. So I received a scholarship to go play. And I'm at Howard, the Mecca, right? Where HBCUs are, where African Americans come, and we have a rich history there. And while I'm playing soccer and I'm studying, I'm going to school, I still felt this absence, right? Long story short, I transferred home and I re-engaged with the friends that I grew up with since I was 5, right? And that kind of helped me get over that hump. But figuring out where I fit as an African American in America, having a unique perspective, a unique voice, seeing America, but also seeing it through a brand new lens. I think there's a lot that we can share, that I can share. But oftentimes the conversations like this don't happen, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I appreciate the avenue to kind of be able to talk about it, because even to connect it to data analytics, I'm in a corporate space,
Yeah.
right? So even having this type of dialogue, right, in the public spaces is taboo,
Yeah.
right? I spent the majority of my career trying to fly under the radar,
Yeah.
right? It's like, okay, I have a unique name, Nasheed Sabree, but you know, it could just be Afrocentric. Like
Yeah,
he just
yeah.
his parents gave him that name.
Yeah, of course, as Muslims, you know, we would identify you right away by your name.
Exactly.
But maybe for non-Muslims, it could be, oh, he's just like another African American.
Exactly.
Really, you know.
And so that's kind of how I was navigating for a while. It's like, okay, you know, can I take a longer lunch on Friday? I really don't want to engage in the dialogue around like why and the what. And it's like, okay, well, do you all have an open office where I can go periodically through the day? It's like, why do you need an office? You're an analyst. Like, stay at your cubicle. I'm like, well, I just, you know, need a little space to go. And then eventually I started telling, you know, managers I trusted, like, hey, I just need a place to go pray. You know, is that okay? They're like, oh, yeah. And then help me understand, like, okay, explain this to me. Mm-hmm. So there's always what I've seen, and honestly, it connects to my family, right? I had forerunners, uncles, et cetera, who worked in corporate spaces, and they kind of passed down those horror stories, those negative experiences they had as people, as you mentioned, forerunners, who weren't allowed to take a long Friday lunch, who didn't have a space where they can go and pray during the day. And so I'm going into these environments with these preconceived notions of intolerance. But what I found is that people are more tolerant now than they were once before. And I think the understanding is starting to slowly move in the right direction. So even when I said, hey, I'm going to work with some of my colleagues, and me as an African American Muslim, I'm going to lead a data analyst, data science, you know, organization, a consulting firm. I had a lot of people say, hey, I don't know if that's a good idea. You know, I don't know if you're going to be able to build trust. Yeah. And some of my greatest allies, some of the greatest supporters have been people who are not African American, who are not Muslim. Yeah. But they appreciate, you know, the talent and the ability that me and my team have. And there's a trust, there's a human element, is what I'm saying, that has allowed us to continue to grow and develop in a space that traditionally, I mean, even for African American, it's not common.
I think I was reading a statistic where I think it was blacks and African Americans in tech are, you know, underemployed and underrepresented. It's like what, like maybe 3-5% of the workforce.
So true.
Yeah. So true. I think that, you know, and I think we were talking the other time when I was in Toronto about UpCity, the initiative to bring black people and you know, and African Americans into tech. And that's, you know, like in Canada, we have like the job diversity plan, you know, bringing racialized into tech. But you can evidently see in the tech space that racialized minorities in general are not represented in the tech space. And I think that's definitely changing now. That's definitely changing. Yeah.
It is. I say one of the keys to, I think, unlocking the opportunity for others is understanding language.
Okay.
And I'll explain what I mean. It's like, what do you mean language?
Yeah, I mean, I'm speaking English.
Right, and I'll keep it as concise as I can. Yeah. Like I mentioned before, how data science, you know, just saying that to someone, can be intimidating. Yeah. Right? Are you interested in data science? It's like, oh, data and science, two things I don't know anything about. But when we talk about it the way we talked about it earlier, where we break it down to simple concepts, then it makes it more digestible and more inviting for others to say, hey, you know, let me give that a shot. And so that's one of the keys that I've seen in terms of people I've mentored and I've talked to. It's like, forget all of the glorified language, all of the complex things that keep us out, and let's just cut straight to the chase.
Yeah. Get straight to the data, you know.
Exactly. Let me show you what all of this is, you know. So demystify it.
Demystify it. No, it needs a lot. It needs a lot, because I think on like when you go on social media, TikTok, YouTube, you know, these glorified. You start with the reel, and the guy is opening his laptop, and he's in a beach in Bali, and you know, nomad life, and I don't think it really works that way.
It doesn't. It does not.
Okay. I think you're starting off as an entry-level analyst and probably like doing Excel stuff, and you know, you work your way into more responsibility. But it is definitely glorified, because it's like, oh, like I'm doing some desk job that I'm not happy with. Let me just be a data analyst and, you know, take my laptop and fly anywhere in the world and Maybe with seniority that comes, that kind of lifestyle, if that's what people are looking for.
I can let you in on a secret.
Okay.
What you are seeing is the, push for remote work.
Yeah.
COVID really unlocked that.
Yeah.
So when you see people with their laptop on the beach in Bali and they're saying, I'm living a nomad life. Yeah. What they're doing is they have a remote job that on the low end pays maybe $50,000. Yeah. $25 an hour. Yeah. High end, maybe they're making 50, 60 an hour. Yeah. Maybe. But it's a remote job typically, and they're single. Okay. So they move to these islands, these nice glorified places, and they work remote from there. Mm-hmm. And if they're living there, that's because their salary with that remote job allows them to do so. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, if you're going to be, someone who's growing and developing in your career, that's not typically going to be your lifestyle. Yeah. You might take trips to the beach. Yeah. But what's going to happen is those jobs that are available to them paying 25, 30, 35, 40 maybe dollars an hour, those jobs are going to disappear. And they're going to be outsourced to other people. It's like, hey, if you're on the beach, let's go and get somebody at a fraction of your cost. Yeah. And I think that's what's going to start happening. But if you're young and you're single and you're making, $50,000, $60,000, I don't know what it is. Maybe you get a job making $100,000. I mean, with inflation, that doesn't feel like $100,000 anymore. Yeah. You can take those types of trips for a little bit. Yeah. You can even set up shop somewhere that has good Wi-Fi, and you can do that for a while. But I say you don't want to be a 45, 50-year-old analyst. Yeah. Those jobs are not going to be there for you. Yeah, so you want to always be looking for what's next, how to upskill and things like that. But if you want to, build a life and live that way, you can. Because I have consultants who don't live in the States, who started out in the States and they've traveled and they live. I think they do it pretty impressive. I traveled and visited some of them, and they're doing pretty well. Yeah. But they work really hard. Yeah. So it's about the work. Yeah. It's like if you're working, and you work hard, you can go to the beach because the time difference, right? Yeah. The work hours are done. Still some daylight. Go for it, But you have to work really hard and be really skilled in order to afford yourself that type of life.
Okay, no, definitely. Yeah, I think that's the good caveat, because with a lot of people, it's like, I'm just gonna go into tech and remote and geographical arbitrage, and my dollar goes 10 times somewhere else in the world, which it does, but it's that you mentioned, you need to put in that work to get there. Coming a little bit back to, Mohammed schools and Islam and identity, what were some of the challenges, as an African American in the tech space, or as you were navigating your career, any moral dilemmas? Because I think in other, as Muslims and other, sectors, there, we could be dealing with things against our faith, where we're put in predicaments where we really don't know. Right. But it seems like for a lot of Muslims who are going into tech, it seems like a safer option because it's just coding and, are there, certain problems that you might run into, even within tech,
There are definitely some challenges you'll run into, some more dilemmas. One of the greatest challenges I ran into was how prevalent alcohol is. Okay. When it comes to social engagements within the business space.
Yeah. Networking. Right. And, so business lunch and dinners and corporate meetings.
Always. And I was always in situations where it's like, hey, have something, get something. I'm like, I don't. Yeah. And it's always the awkward conversation. Oh, why not? Or this or that. And so that was always a point of like anxiety for me. It's like, I don't want to have to explain it. And it got to a point where it's like, you know what? I'm just going to say it, right? Yeah. That's just not something I do, right? Yeah. And it's like, oh, okay. And then like I said, we're slowly moving to more and more, because there's a few different reasons why people don't drink. Yeah. It's not just religious based. Yeah. But that was one that I found. Mm-hmm. Also, one of the challenges is really just overcoming inherent bias. Okay. What do you mean by that? So when you're presenting, whether you're trying to go for a role or obviously as the head of rower. Yeah. I'm an African-American man, right? Who's heading up a consulting firm that works with some pretty sizable companies, and we have some amazing clients and some awesome leaders within these companies. Mm-hmm. However, there's just the inherent bias that sometimes comes about when it says, everything you're saying sounds good, but I'm trying to understand
you,
and how do you know this information? It's like, explain that.
Yeah.
So what helps is obviously having amazing team members and things of that nature. But I've been in a number of rooms where I'm in interviews. I might be answering the question absolutely right? Everything is A1. And I don't feel like I'm connecting with the person I'm talking to.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's the answer you're looking for. You acknowledge the answer is correct. Yeah. But it's like, sometimes you might come across people, not a lot, I'm not pretending like it's a lot, but I've been in rooms where it's almost like, I'm going to ask you a question that you would ask no one else at this level, right? It's like, I'm going to ask you something silly.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do you now handle that and continue to move forward? So I think inherent bias has definitely been a challenge, but it's overcome by creating relationships and delivering
bridging
value.
Gaps,
exactly. Yeah. And having people who are, I look at as internal champions. Yeah. So when we get into one company, we do great work there. We get those internal people to help eliminate some of the bias when we move into another department, or we have them introduce us as a consulting firm that's done amazing work, right? Yeah. And that helps to ease any tension where it's like, okay, why you all versus, somebody else. So.
And, as you're navigating that space, do you feel like there could be also room, as a Muslim, for positive change with data, with what's going on in the world with wars and famine and social inequality, and, we have social justice warriors and Twitter keyboard warriors, but I think data, it's like the numbers don't lie. That's how I like to look at it. And, when you're presented with the data, it's just like, oh, wow, I really can't escape that, I can try to skew it, to my agenda, but generally when you see charts and visualizations and data and, it's from the right sources,
right,
it's sort of inescapable reality. It's like, oh, wow, there's a lot of people who live below the poverty line, or a lot of people who are, but as a Muslim, are there ways where, people in tech and maybe specifically data can use data and analytics to sort of amplify the voices of the voiceless, push social justice and that kind of stuff?
I think so. And I think it's going to come about from something that we didn't spend a lot of time talking about. Yeah. It's data visualization.
Okay.
Because we hear the numbers, we understand what's going on in certain parts of the world, but for the most part, our attention spans are short. Yeah. And we're visual. Yeah. So when you show somebody, like you said, the charts and graphs and things like that, it brings it to life. Yeah. So I think that's where the opportunity is going to be, because quite frankly, it's out of sight, out of mind. It's like, if it's not, if you could tell me like, this is what's going on, but charts have the ability to kind of show just how drastic, the situation is. Yeah. And that is something I think that we'll see more of. Okay. And whether it's politics, whether it's, international affairs, whatever it is, we're gonna need more visuals, because just word of mouth, it doesn't resonate. Even when you say, hey, numbers, start shouting out numbers around whatever it is, right? Those things don't always register, because a number can be stated. So for example, 20,000 people, right? Is that a lot of people? Is a little bit of, right? It's a small number. It just depends. But if it's 20,000 out of 30,000 that were displaced, then it's like, that's a significant number. If it's 20,000 out of 2 billion, then it's like, is that really how big of an issue is it? So people don't always have context when they hear these numbers. It's like, okay, well, this happened to this many people. It's like, okay, well, there's billions of people in the world. We keep it moving. But when you zero in on like the actual impact of that number, then you start to understand, okay, how serious is this issue? Okay,
and so if we're going to take maybe data visualization a bit further, what does that really entail? Is it, is it just bar graphs and charts, or could it be something else?
It can absolutely be something else. Okay. Like, this is what gets me excited. Okay. Because there are some examples out there. I'll give you an example when we talk about like worldly affairs. Yeah. There was a map that was developed in Tableau, series of maps that showed the different empires over time, with like ancient like overlay on the map, and shows the empires and their influence over certain regions in the world over time. Okay. So imagine you go back to the 12th century.
Yeah.
You know, and you kind of just see it changing, and you see like the size of like the colors changing over like, you know, Russia or whatever it was at the time, and then you see it move, and that helped me visualize, okay, how are these populations interacting, intermingling, and connecting the dots in a more realistic way versus like when you grow up, you're reading world history texts and it's like
boring and dry. Yeah. Can barely get past the page. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's how it was. I was like, okay, history is like, but when you see it and you can make that visual connection to what's happening, that's powerful. And that can happen in all the industries that we're concerned with.
Okay, so talk to me a little bit more about visual. I think with visualization, it's like you can filter. You have like slicers. You can zoom in into like a certain period of time.
Yep.
And then zoom back out, go forward and go backwards. And so, is that what you're sort of alluding to when you talk about visual?
Absolutely. Okay. That's exactly it.
Okay.
Because we see all of these, you know.
So it's more like user interactivity.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
That's what adds that's what makes it stick. Because maybe as an individual, I just care about the first couple centuries, but you want the whole, the whole thing, Okay.
Yep.
Okay. How about data visualization and like, videos and that kind of stuff? Is that something that could, happen sometime?
I think so. I think they're already starting to do it.
Okay.
So when you watch like Netflix, or if you have a Fire Stick and you watch like the smart TV, they're now embedding apps that you can interact with.
Okay.
Those are all driven by data. So they're trying to make the customer experience more interactive. So it's like, okay, I look at the profile based on your IP address, and I understand it's you, right? It's okay, he likes this, he likes that. These are the shows he watches. This is, we can guess his relative income based on the geography.
Yeah.
Then we can start to send, ads his way during commercial breaks, and see if he responds. So they're now starting to incorporate data visualization just in terms of like, all right, we have a data point. We're predicting that this is a good ad to show it to him, see if he reacts. And that's happening on Instagram, that's happening on YouTube, that's happening everywhere.
Yeah.
So they're incorporating that. And I think it will expand with AI. I think we're going to start to see, you probably, I don't know if you recall those books back in the day where it's like choose your own adventure. Where it's like you get to a certain page.
It's a series of,
I am anticipating seeing more of that in the content that's produced by like your major, content creators.
Okay, so as you're watching, you can
choose. Yep.
Okay, that's really interesting, man. Yeah.
So in all of these things, I think are going to help. It's so many, I think, avenues that data analytics and data visualization can take.
Yeah.
But I see it being incorporated. Absolutely.
Okay. And then as we sort of wrap up, what would be some of your final, let's say, pieces of advice or, suggestions for people, let's say those that have an inclination to getting into data analytics, or those that are in, other fields and industries, but are seeing the growth of data and the integration of technology in their, work spaces, and, how should they sort of move forward? Maybe we can start with the aspiring data analyst.
Yeah. I think the advice I would share is just jump.
Okay.
Because a lot of people are looking for that perfect opportunity, the perfect time. And I'm going to say it like this. It's not going to be comfortable. It's not. You're going to be uncomfortable, and you have to kind of grow comfortable being uncomfortable, and trust that you have the ability to learn what you don't know. And I think that's the biggest piece of advice that I can share is don't be afraid to fail forward. Don't be afraid, to look silly going after what it is you want.
Yeah.
Success is not a straight line. It's not a straight path. You're gonna go through a lot of different difficulties and challenges, but it's worth it, and that's where everybody started. Everybody starts at the same point where they know a little bit, they learn a little bit more, and they just keep going. Just go for it. Obviously, go after the opportunities that are in front of you. Learn to study the tools and technology so you're familiar with it. But leap. Once you make that decision that this is what you want to do, commit to it, and I guarantee you'll be successful.
Okay. And then how about the second segment of those who might not be looking to get in, but maybe want to familiarize themselves with, analytics and tech, are there things that maybe they can learn on the side, or concepts maybe they can acclimatize themselves to?
That's a good question.
Because you find a lot of people who are like intimidated, like, the conversations like, oh, AI is going to take my job, or is your job AI proof,
Right,
people,
right. That's
like,
true. That's
I need
true.
to AI proof my job and tech is going to automate it. And so you have a lot of people who are a bit anxious. They're like, oh, what do I do? I don't really know tech. I'm not a programmer, and so what should people like that do? I know it's very vague, but
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
I think everyone's talking about AI, and it's coming. It is coming. And there will be some jobs that you will see, eliminated. I don't think it's going to be as many as people are, suggesting.
Yeah.
Not at all. I mean, if you look historically, everything that's come is supposed to eliminate something, right?
Yeah.
The advent of the computer, then the tablet, and so many other tools and technologies, softwares that have been created. All it has done is create more jobs, more opportunity.
Yeah.
So I think with AI and ML, there's going to come an opportunity for people who are leaders in those spaces.
Yeah.
And what it's going to do is make those leaders better. Okay. Because right now there are leaders who spend time writing Python code, right? With, certain tools and technologies that are enabled by AI, they'll spend less time writing the code. The code will get done, so now they can add more value to the business, right? So it's just going to unlock opportunity for those people who are thinkers, those people who, see it as a tool. It's not going to replace human beings. Human beings are the ones who are behind it, the design. Human beings have the ability to kind of, break the rules, and I'm sure they can try to design AI with some of that. But there's a unique capacity that we have, and I think those people who are afraid of what's coming are similar to the people who were afraid of, streaming services developing, Don't be afraid of it. Embrace what's coming and get ahead of it. Like those people who said, all right, we're going to keep the brick and mortar video stores.
Yeah.
They had an opportunity to shift. But I always say things come in cycles.
Yeah.
We'll see AI come. It will eliminate some jobs, and some of those jobs will be.
And it might create new jobs as well.
It will. Yeah. It definitely will. And I say what we're seeing is, even in the future, AI models will need to be monitored in case there's some anomalies that pop up. So it's going to enable, I think, a new tech revolution. So whether you are considering yourself in tech or not, you will be.
You will be.
You will be.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, man. It's great golden advice, and I'd like to thank you once again for this wonderful interview and podcast.
Thank you.
And to all the viewers, we're here with Mr. Nasheed, CEO and VP of Data Science at Rower Consulting. Well over a decade in the analytics space. So please make sure to check out his socials. We'll leave them in the description below, and have yourselves a good day.